let's just talk about in general kind of the situation that we are with our city. And Tom kind of hit it right on the head. We're a city that the major part of the city was developed, you know, big chunk in the 50s, but 60s and 70s, but mostly 50s and 60s, late 60s, early 70s. And so when you take those years and you calculate it out, like if you were built in the 50s, right? You know, like me, I'm kind of worn out already. The plumbing's kind of shot. It's kind of the same thing with your houses and your property. So the things that you have to look at you know, Tom called it growth. I don't really call it growth. I just call it improvement. Because in reality, there's not like vacant fields here anymore in this city. This city's built out already. So it's just really a matter of reusing the property that we have in a different method. So in our city, and I'm going to be off of these numbers a little bit, there's about 26,000 parcels. 26,000 parcels. So think about that whenever somebody talks about they're building 12 homes here or 100 homes or 50. There's 26,000 parcels in the city. And we're basically built out. And even if, you know, all the things that's planned out there, we're talking about 4, 5, 6%, you know, change in what the city could be because we're actually replacing something that exists in the city. One of the things that this council has looked at strongly, and I would just say because of the members of the council, and it reflects a lot in the Planning Commission, I'm going to have Colin come up here and talk about it, is that a couple basic principles. One is a strong belief in private property rights. It's very, very important. But in those private property rights, remember we have a set of rules. And it says what you can develop on property, what you can do on property. This is not Houston. Houston has like no planning. If you know about certain cities have like no zoning. Basically everything's done in those cities is done by deed restrictions, which isn't necessarily the worst thing to do. They use deed restrictions saying this property gets built out and it's a deed restriction for 100 years. It can only be houses and it's always houses for those areas. So there's different ways to do that. But in our city, we're structured with zoning. And in that we have different ways to decide what we can or cannot do with the property. Now from a big picture, here's the biggest problem that we have in the city. If you took a map of our zoning map of the city and you look at it, they're all different colors. And it's all over the place. And you'll see in the middle of industrial areas a whole street of houses right in the middle of it. You'll see fourplexes right up against single family houses. You'll see all sorts of things. So, you know, one of the inside jokes is, you know, the city planning, you know, what's city planning? The reality of it is that Costa Mesa, when it was incorporated in '53, had already been developed upon. It was county property, but it already had zoning overlays on it. And in a county the size of Orange, if you want to do something on your property and you got vacant farm fields and you say, I want to do industrial here, you kind of just say, I want to do that, and you can do it. I'm not saying it's exactly that way, but there's a lot of leeway. So when finally, if you've talked to the Historical Society, people in the town, they'll tell you there was kind of a situation where Santa Ana was going to come in and take half the city and Newport was going to take the other half. And finally, on the second try, we incorporated our own city to kind of take control. But when we took control of that, the lines were pretty much already drawn. Then you add on top of that all the property that was owned by the federal government. So the whole fairgrounds, by '63 wasn't, it was the fairgrounds, but that was the air base. Fairview Developmental Center. Fairview Park, massive pieces of property, Orange Coast College. You start looking at these pieces of property, they're kind of plopped in our city, and again, not a lot of planning. I mean, they're just big pieces that happen to be owned by the state or the federal government, and they were used for the purposes they were used for. But I wouldn't call this some kind of laid out arterial plan or city here. So with that being said, as our city gets older, we have to decide what do we want to do. And I can tell you that if you don't move forward and protect those private property rights, people will not invest money in their neighborhoods and in their areas. And I will just, you know, tell anybody to drive up the 710 freeway, drive up the 110 freeway, and see what happens when you don't move forward, when you don't get money to revitalize. You know, that's still Southern California. Those were some really great neighborhoods, but it gets to the point where people don't even want to invest money. So the city's taken it upon themselves, number one, to spend a lot of money on infrastructure. You'll see a lot of street improvements, center divider improvements, the east side signs are going in now. Drainage systems that never existed in the city. We did it over on Center Street. You know, we had neighborhoods that flood every time it got a bad rain, as if like that was normal. And when it was asked, why did you do that? Well, it's expensive. Okay, it's expensive, doesn't matter. People can't have water come in their front door. And so you have to fix those kind of things. So the city now and the leadership has made sure we put dollars into redoing it. So if you go into certain neighborhoods and you notice when a new street goes in, the existing street gets redone and the curbs and gutters are redone, I don't know, I just kind of notice houses started getting painted and picket fences start going up. And you know, when you do alleys on the east side, you notice how all of a sudden people are putting in brand new roll-up doors and redoing the garages and in some cases tearing the house down. Because when the city shows it cares and puts in a brand new concrete, you know, alleyway so your car doesn't get dirty every time it hits a hole when it rains out, people look at their property and say, you know, I'm going to invest and I'm going to do things. And so we're seeing a lot of that. And obviously a lot of it has to do with the economy. So throughout the city, values are moving up. The city is continuing to be revitalized, and I'll take a lot of questions about different projects that we have in here, but what I want to do now is kind of bring a planning commissioner up, Colin McCarthy. Now, Colin's been on the planning commission for 7 years. 7 years. Now, on our planning commissioner, we have 5 planning commissioners, 4 working law firms, 3 lawyers?
4 lawyers.
4.
Jeff, Tim.
Oh, Jeff's a lawyer too.
Jeff's a lawyer.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Too many lawyers. It's way too many.
I know. How do we get anything done, right? It's a bright group of people, and I'm going to let Colin talk about it here, because Colin constantly has to make decisions about when people bring things forward. Now, remember, we have the basic set of rules. We have the basic structure of what you can put there, and for the most part, things don't have to go through the Planning Commission. But at some point, when you don't have this perfect master plan, there wasn't a perfect master plan, someone has to make the call. I call it the referee. And whether you agree with the call or disagree with the call, someone has to make the call. And so what we've got is 5 phenomenal planning commissioners that learn how to make that call. And what I like to do is have Colin talk about those decisions and based on the whole concept of private property rights and why it's so important to make sure that we follow that and not just say, well, we don't like this or we do like that. What are the private property rights? What goes with that property as it sits the way today? So, Colin.
All right, thanks. This feels like one of those big beer mugs that you get when you go out to hold. Again, I'm Colin McCarthy. I've been in Costa Mesa for over 10 years now, 10 plus. To kind of understand where we are today, you have to go back in time. So I'll ask you to step in your time machine back to 2008, 2009, the time period that I got on the Planning Commission. Costa Mesa was dead. We were a victim of the economy. You drive down Harbor Boulevard, and all you saw at the time was green fences. You know, those chain link fences with the green tarps on them. When I got on the commission, nothing was happening. What we were doing in our meetings, they were real quick. We were time extensions. For everybody come and say the economy's in the toilet, we need more time to build our projects. South Coast Collection was the first major project. SoCo over here was on life support. It had become basically a used furniture bazaar. You'd go over there and they were hawking all sorts of wares, and they came to the city on life support and said, we're going bankrupt, we need a lifeline. And that project got revitalized and developed, and then slowly Harbor started to change. You saw In-N-Out come in as a catalyst, and then the rest of Harbor Boulevard moved. The economy rebounded, and what we started to see was investment in real estate, investment in services, and it's phenomenal now to see what Costa Mesa has become. Last night, we had a planning commission meeting, and one of the items was Social, which is a restaurant, speakeasy sort of place on 19th and Harbor. And they went through what they are and the awards that they've received and how they're becoming a culinary hub. Costa Mesa has become a culinary hub. People want to come here, new restaurants are opening up, things are happening, and a lot of that is because of the economy. I mean, it's just people have money now, banks are spending cautiously, but still spending more money, and we're seeing Costa Mesa be a place that people want to be. My grandparents grew up in Costa Mesa. Well, I grew up in Costa Mesa. When I grew up, my grandparents were here in Costa Mesa, and the city didn't look like anything like it looked today. Crystal Court, and they don't like to call that part of South Coast Plaza Crystal Court, but that was it. That was where you went and hung out. Bought my shoes at Nike Town and hung out at Crystal Court, and that was it. And now you drive through the city and you see so many different things happening. So the question becomes, how do we handle all of that? How do we deal with all of that in a way that doesn't impact our quality of life? And it's constantly a difficult issue to deal with. One of those is to make sure that people are following the rules. There's two sort of golden rules on our planning commission that have been sort of sacred cows since I've been there. Number one is parking, and number two is density. I can tell you at least once a month, a developer comes to me and meets with me in my office with a plan. And the plan is always underparked or overdense. And the response they always get is thanks, but no thanks, that's not going to fly. So many projects start asking for the sun and the moon, and then they come down to earth and they figure out what they're going to get. We're very tough on our parking. Parking is an important issue because it's been brought up, and there's a belief out there that new development that is happening is exacerbating, making our parking situation worse. It's absolutely not true. We are having projects that are fully parked, meaning if it's a single-family residential house, it's got to have 4 spots, 2 in the garage. And in the garage means you got to park your car in the garage. We're forcing, and it seems a little bit Big Brother-ish, but we're forcing parking. They have to police their own parking. They actually have to go in. There's an association. They have to go in and make sure that there's cars in there, you know, and not an elliptical machine. Park your cars in your garage, because Costa Mesa has always had a bad parking problem, and the only way we're going to improve parking is by forcing people to comply with the rules. The other one is density. Density is really a hot potato. It's sort of this buzzword. People hear density and they're concerned, what is density? We have had a number of projects in which folks have sought additional density, and it just doesn't happen. We do have urban plans and overlay zones in the west side where there's some density allowances over there. That's a different animal. We do not have, and we're not really going through the high density battles that they're going on. If you drive down Jamboree or parts of Irvine, go to the Spectrum, you'll see the building that's going on down there. Amazing densities, because they've made a decision that they want to be an urban, eclectic, more dense place. And we just don't see Costa Mesa going there. But there has to be a realization that a city that doesn't grow dies. And that's what's been so frustrating to me to hear from folks that are sort of anti-improvement. And Jim hit it on the head. It's not growth, because we're not talking about bulldozing houses and putting in, you know, condos and apartments 7 feet, 8 feet high, or 8 stories high. We're talking about revitalizing houses and taking advantage of what the market is doing. A lot of these are market forces. Here's an interesting statistic that our planning division is so proud of. Last year in 2015 was the record year for building inspections. So, you know, they have building inspectors go out, and the mechanical system will be one inspection, and then the footings will be another inspection, and they have all these different inspections, right? Last year, the city of Costa Mesa performed over 31,000 inspections. 2010, the bottom of that 10-year curve, it was 13,000. So we're talking about, God, almost 3 times as many inspections last year. And the building folks are really proud of that. But if you peel the onion back on that, the layers, and look at it a little bit more, what you see is, because I've looked at them, all the inspections are up on the city's planning website every day. You can go and see where the inspectors are going, at what time, what they're going to be looking at. So many of those are not necessarily new construction. What they are is what you see in your neighborhoods, and that is people who are investing in Costa Mesa. They're putting a new roof on their house because of El Nino. They're landscaping their yard. In my case, my kitchen was horrible. We said money is still cheap. We'll go out and borrow some money, and we'll gut our kitchen and redo our kitchen because we want to stay in Costa Mesa. These are people who aren't leaving Costa Mesa, taking the gains. Now, we have a few of those people who said, hey, listen, I've been in my house since the 70s. I'm going to take my money and run. But we have so many people now, and the building inspection sheets reflect this, that are taking their money and their equity and their value in their house, and they're investing it because they want to be in Costa Mesa. They want to be at this hub of activity. They want to be near we live here because we're close to the beach, and we're close to the 55 and the 405 and the 73, and we can get places. That's one of the things we love about Costa Mesa is its location. So what we're seeing now is this sort of reinvestment in our community. It's really exciting to me when somebody comes with a plan to the Planning Commission and they say, I've got this. We had one on the east side. It was a house that was built in the 1920s. It had no garage, literally 0 garage. It didn't require garages, I guess, in the 20s. So the people that were living in this old house for a while were parking all their cars on the streets in the east side, no garage. So they come in and they demolish this house, the plan was, and they put in 4 parking spaces. So now we've not only improved this building that had this fence up around it and weeds growing and there was a homeless problem and all that. Now you got this beautiful single-family house that's taking cars off of the street. So it's a wonderful sort of reinvention of how we are, and it's really, really refreshing to see it. But along with change inevitably comes opposition. It's natural. People are saying, I like Costa Mesa, it's a small, quiet little town, and I don't like change. Well, I can tell you guys, change is inevitable. There was an article in the OC Register last year that I pointed out at the Planning Commission. City of Santa Ana had a record low number of building permits issued. They just said, we don't want to issue building permits. We don't want your projects, we're not going to be supportive. Guess what happened? It didn't stop people from coming to Santa Ana. They still came. They just started cramming more into bedrooms and more into garages. They have a major garage problem because they have people that want to be in Orange County. They want to be in Santa Ana. They want to be in Costa Mesa. If you don't manage it, you can't bang up a sign at Victoria out, near the river saying, thanks, but no thanks. No, you're not welcome in Costa Mesa. We have to learn ways to deal with it. I always think to myself, will my kids be able to live in Costa Mesa when they get older? I have little kids. Will they be able to grow up and live in Costa Mesa? And what I hear from a lot of sort of naysayers at the Planning Commission that come down and complain about change is I internalize it and I see it's you had yours, but now they can't get theirs. And there's a fundamental inequity in that I got a great opportunity to buy a house and raise my family, but I don't want you to be able to do that. And that really frustrates me and hurts me as an individual because I want my kids to be able to live in Costa Mesa. I love it. I'd love to save a bunch of money and have them go to OCC and live at home and be able to buy a house and be near me and all of those things. And I just wanted to have the same chances. That's all. So a couple things that are coming up because I know people are asking about them. There is an initiative that's being circulated that I know people are signing to, I think they're calling it smart growth, or it's got some moniker that's catchy as measures usually do. I don't have a dog in that fight. My term in the Planning Commission ends. This is my last year. I'm done. I'm spending more time with the kids. I don't have, there's no power grab. I'm trying to take away the voice of the people and keep it for myself. The problem with ballot box zoning, and I've read all the literature on ballot box zoning. I have it if you want it. You can read the cases. There's been a ton of studies done on it, is that it takes away, well, first of all, it takes away the power and the elected officials that you have, but take an example. If I'm I don't like to, developer is one of those ugly words. I call them applicants. If I'm an applicant and I want to do a project in Costa Mesa, let's talk about, you guys know where Argo Tech is, the big old industrial place, the old industrial place across the street from Trader Joe's, right at Superior. It was an abandoned old building there that sat for years and years and years. It was an environmental catastrophe. They did almost everything over there now that you could never get away with under EPA and California regulations. That project sat, and finally somebody came to the city and said, I want to revitalize it. I want to build homes over there. We're across the street from Trader Joe's. Superior goes right down to the ocean, right at PCH down there. Great location. That project, because of its parameters, does not happen if we have ballot box zoning in the city. It just doesn't happen. And here's the reason why. And that's because if I'm looking at making an investment and buying that piece of property, guess what I got to do? I got to clean it up. Now, the government isn't going to come in and clean that property up. We don't want them to do that. We don't want them taking taxpayer money to come in and clean up a site that somebody polluted. Somebody else should clean up that site. The market should take care of that. That's why we have free market. Nobody is going to come and develop that property. That project never gets fixed or cleaned if you have ballot box zoning. Because if I look at it and say, well, I'm going to spend $50 million or whatever millions of dollars on the property. I've met with the planning commissioners in the city, and they seem generally supportive of the idea. But then I have to go to the voters in the election after that. Who knows when that's going to be, and get approval. I'm basically rolling the dice, because I have no idea what the voters are going to do. Why am I going to invest millions and millions of dollars hiring architects and environmental consultants and doing all the front-end work and going to the city if it's a crapshoot at the end of the day whether or not I'm going to get my project approved? The voters may say no. It may be a wonderful project that everybody loves, but the voters may go, no, not interested in it. People aren't going to do that. And that's the problem with sort of de facto planning commissions. It really becomes the body politic, the residents being your planning commission. it's a great conceptual idea. Hey, let the people have the final say over construction. It just practically speaking, it kills projects. Now, fortunately for us, we're a 98% built out city. There isn't that much major space left to build, but it's really going to tie the hands of folks that are visionaries, that are creative, that say, Costa Mesa is this great place. I want to go invest money in a project over there. Oh, I forgot. They've got that ballot measure where I got to go to the voters. I'm going to go to Santa Ana and do it. I'm going to go to Huntington Beach and do it. Other cities don't have that. Some coastal cities do. Up north you see it, but it's just, I really want folks to get educated about what it is that it's trying to accomplish. Why do you elect a city council? Why do you have city staff? Why do you have this whole structure in place of people if at the end of the day it all becomes irrelevant and they don't matter and you got to go to the people? I mean, if that's your logic, then every single thing the city council does on Tuesday night should be voted on by the people. I mean, at some point it just sort of gets silly. So I don't, I think that if it qualifies for the ballot, I think there's going to be a lot of wonderful things talking about returning the power to the people to vote on these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, I think it really, really hurts Costa Mesa. And it's going to kill things like that Argotech project. And again, I'll reiterate, that project does not happen in this city if a ballot measure like this passes, period. Nobody is going to come and invest that kind of money trying to clean up. And keep in mind, we have a lot more polluted sites on the west side. People say the government should simply come in and clean it all up for us. It's just not going to happen. If we don't have a free market to do that, we're going to be stuck. So I see that sort of movement as being sort of contradicting things like the West Side plans and some of the ideas that we have in the city to try to keep on improving and making Costa Mesa a good place to live. But I hope you guys will get out and learn more about it, and educate yourselves about it. So I think I've taken up too much time, so I'm going to turn it back over to Jim and see if he has any other comments. Sure.
Well, let's just take some questions. Any questions out there about the city? It doesn't have to be about planning. It could be about anything else in the city at all you'd like to know about. Maybe we might know the answer. Okay, Tom here first, and then you next, Bob. Tom?
Tell us a little bit about the industrial way project there and how that's changed the environment there as well as changed the economics to the...
Okay, so on the west side, there was an overlay plan put in about 2000, it was the original one? Almost 10 years. Before we got in, but 2006, I think it was done, right in that area. I know, worked on it for years. And it basically was on the west side to have an overlay to say, well, let me back up a little bit. You would go to projects on the west side, industrial projects, and I'll never forget the story, and I think it was your story, where a guy's, reupholstering a chair with the ocean view right behind him. And it's like, what do we have all this industrial property right up close to the ocean? Well, understand again, we weren't a planned community as such. And if you're in Newport Beach, this was farther from the ocean. The industrial area was up here on the hill, up on Goat Hill. That's where it was. And so we have an industrial area that at the time was far from the beach. It's now considered close to the beach and considered the nicest properties that we have. So what was done was a plan was put in place to do an overlay. So at the time, people wanted to put residential in those neighborhoods and do a zone change. And I talked to the different city council people, said, do not do that. Do not do that. Because if you do a zone change to residential, if you have an industrial business there, you're considered legal non-conforming, meaning you can continue to do your business, you just can't grow it, you can't do what you want to do, and it's taking away private property rights. An overlay says you can continue to do your business, continue to do your industrial, continue to do whatever you want to do, but if you want to, there's a residential overlay. And the residential overlay said that you could go, depending on how you measured it, there was floor area ratio or units, but basically you could get up to about 19 units per acre. And what that was considered to be is the balance in traffic of how much that industrial was using or the commercial was using already in those amount of houses. So it had to be a traffic neutral plan. And so that overlay was put in place. And then once it was put in place, a couple projects were approved, but nothing happened. Nothing got built because the economy went down. And so the first project that came was right next to Wendy's project on 18th Street. 3-story. I remember when it first went up, people were like, oh my gosh, these 3 stories are pretty big and all that. Of course, you go on the roof and you see the ocean, And there was a complete change in consciousness of what people think of Costa Mesa. So you got these young families, these people that are making some pretty good money. These aren't inexpensive units. Looking at roof decks, seeing the mountains, seeing Palos Verdes and whatever. And so that was the first project that had been approved 6-8 years before, but because of the economy, it didn't come forward. Since that time of the sale of that, more and more projects came in. But from financial situation to our city, and one of the things we talk about is the pension obligations that we have. And as much as I could argue about them and say that they were done wrong and it should never happen, that's all interesting. We have pension obligations. We've got to pay the bills. And one of the things is that you have a growing community or a changing community, an improving community, the same piece of property with the same traffic model on it, when converted to residential, brings substantially more money. And the example I'll bring is the project that's on Industrial Way and Newport Boulevard. You know where the Carl's Jr. is? Right at the corner of the city. That's the quarter across the street's Newport. That was a few acres, a couple parcels. There was a boatyard. I mean, not like a work on a boatyard, like store boatyard. And then an old trailer park. It wasn't, nice motor homes. It was older stuff. It had some really good people in there and some real problem people in there. It was just one of those areas that needed to be looked at. The property owner, the applicant, came into that project that's there now to use the overlay and to put in, I want to say it was 60, ended up with the two parcels, 60 of these 3-story properties. They are either completely sold out or about sold out, averaged a little over $800,000 a piece. So let me talk from a financial standpoint for the city. First off, they're 3 stories, a lot of staircases, not exactly people that are going to come in there and raise a lot of kids. You might go in there before you have kids and then have some babies and then move on. But people move when things work for them or don't work for them. The buyers in there have high incomes, obviously, from the $800,000 sales price. But the property taxes previously, the value of the property from assessment standpoint was about $3.5 million. That means the city, the county, the school district got a total of $35,000 a year, 1%. That property now is worth $48 million. So instead of $35,000, $480,000 in property taxes comes in now. 35% goes to the school district, percentage goes to the county, percentage of it goes to the city, but on that same 3.5-acre parcel. I mean, there's not really much change at all except the vibrancy. Now, when you look at it on top of all that, you just added 80 families that have incomes in excess of $125,000 apiece on an area that before had a boatyard. So when you start looking at that math, you can see how quickly a community, if it's done right, can dig itself out of a hole, that the growth will be there. Like I said, in the end, the bill's got to be paid. You can't just say you don't want to pay the bill. So we're going to see that throughout. I was just at a project on the very western edge of the city at Whittier, right up against the Newport line next to Banning Ranch. And the model homes are up. I think it's going to be a total of 71 detached homes. I have no idea what they're going to sell for, but it'll be a lot. They're 3-story homes. With roof decks on top of them. The second and third story had ocean views, and the roof decks obviously all had ocean views from a zip code here in Costa Mesa. It's pretty amazing. And again, that was an industrial building. I don't know what the valuation on it was. It's going to be $4 or $5 million, and that's probably going to be $100 million in valuation towards property taxes, which is a substantial amount of dollars difference coming in. Again, 40 or 50 grand coming in now, $1 million comes in, and what you find from new housing, you hear this all the time, well, it doesn't pay for itself. Trust me, new housing pays for itself. Older Prop 13 housing is a problem. There's, and I'm supportive of Prop 13, never going to change it. But clearly, if somebody's paying, 25% of what their next door neighbor's paying, it's less dollars that are coming in. Brand new housing product does a big deal to go ahead and pay for that. Bob, you had a question there?
Yes. This is for you, Jim. Over the past several years, under your leadership, we've made several passes at a city charter. Mm-hmm. And I've been, but they've been soundly defeated both times.
Correct.
If I'm not mistaken, all of our neighboring cities are charter cities.
Correct.
So my question is a two-part question. how were they able to get us a charter passed? And do you plan on making another pass?
So the question was about charter. We had taken 2 runs at becoming a charter city. The cities all around us are charter cities. If you're a charter city advocate and you get it, you're just like, why wouldn't you be a charter city? The reality of it is that it has to be voted in by the public, and the public has to make their choice. Probably the biggest distinction between us becoming a charter city and saying like Newport, I think Newport was in the 50s. They didn't get it the first time, they got it the second time. Irvine got it right away. But at the time, we didn't have the issue where there was a lot of money against it because we didn't have the labor unions who could fund the opposition. And so, you know, the reality of it is the reason you save money in a charter city is that you as a general law city, we are required to have every employee in the city, unless the bargaining unit agrees, to be a municipal employee and have and be in the union. Meaning, until recently, our business cards were all printed in the building. We had a printer. Couldn't send it to Jiffy, couldn't send it out, couldn't outsource it. We were required by law to have an employee do it. Now, if we had never done that before, we wouldn't, but we had a printer, you know, back when the city was started. And so there's certain things that you do. If you're a charter city, you just say, I want to outsource whatever, 911. We just finally negotiated with the employees to let us outsource park maintenance. I mean, do you really need a person with a pension package and everything else to cut grass? Probably not. And so there has to be some balance. So we're going to go the model now, which Newport has and Irvine has, which is, you know, we manage the contracts of people who do the work in the city, but the work in the city is not necessarily done by a municipal employee. But again, now the question is, would we do it again? Once something politically is beaten up to the point where no matter right or wrong doesn't matter, okay? Once it's beat up to the point where people have an interpretation of it, the pitch was a very good pitch. 3 people on your city council can change everything. Do you want to have that? 3 people on your city council can change everything. If you make it like, you know, a dark room with cigar smoking and glasses of bourbon, I think the mailers went out and showed that. Well, people don't know me. They don't know Steve. They don't know people on the council. People really believe, oh my gosh, there is some deal here. They're going to cut a deal for themselves, and that's what's going to happen. Once that impression happens, you're kind of stuck with it. And so to sit there and say, would you do it again? You know, I fought for it. I liked it. But politically, I understand that that's not going to happen for a number of years would have to pass. And so it'd be, the people that are in office now wouldn't really probably be a part of doing a charter.
So do you think the reason that these surrounding cities got theirs was just because they did it years ago when there was not union opposition like there is?
The money wasn't the big difference. Back then, remember, you know, my dad was a municipal employee, my brother a municipal employee. Back in those days, you got a job in a municipal government not because you made more money, but because it was good job security. And so you had a lot of people that would go for those jobs. It was great. Since that time, and this is not me saying, this is statistics out there, the pay has clearly caught up to the private sector. The benefits have gone beyond the private sector, and the pensions have gone beyond that. There's a lot of money at stake here. And so, you know, and again, some people would think that you're going to fire everybody. You could. I mean, once you became a charter city, you can say, hey, all your employees are gone. We don't need it anymore. The fact of the matter is nobody was going to do that, but that's a good scare tactic, too, to say you're going to fire everybody. In fact, what we did to negotiate with the unions in the end to get rid of some of the sources was we never fired anybody. We did it all with attrition. We said, listen, we need help. You know, we'll give you your pay raise. We'll do what we need to do. But like on street sweeping, we just outsourced that. I think we're one of the last cities in the county to do it. Got an outside company to street sweep. We were down to having part-time employees and retired employees coming back driving the street sweepers. I mean, we just were, because what we didn't want to do is hire somebody and then say we had to lay them off. That's just not, you know, the right thing to do. So that's how we're able to do it, by not laying anybody off, and that was taken over. Here, Paul, and then over here.
I have 2 questions. One should be fairly short. You mentioned enforcing indoor garage parking, or forcing people to actually park inside the garage. I'm on the board over at the Monticello Homeowners Association, and we go back and forth whether or not we can enforce that within the complex. The lawyers say we can, the lawyers say we can't, but if the city has an ordinance that does that, that'll really help us with the...
Yeah, let me make it a clarification what I said. The projects he sees are brand new projects. And so when the brand new projects come in, they'll have their CCNRs or they'll have their set of rules. And in that will require that the 2 spaces always be available for a garage. And we've gotten to the point now on the new projects to help out the association, quite frankly, to give them a lever to say the association every single year must certify under penalty of perjury that they've checked in those garages or not, because you don't want the government checking people's garages, okay? Now, the problem is that in the older ones, you've got your rights to do what you can do, but we're never as a city going to go back to those and start doing some kind of enforcement mechanism. We can maybe give tools to associations that want to do it on their own and vote for it themselves, but we're just not going to do it.
No, just having the city do it as a precedent gives us a little bit of leverage. We already have it in our CCNRs. We just never enforce it.
Yeah, you can absolutely enforce it. Here's the biggest problem. I lived in a small lot subdivision. It was 30 homes, and it's human nature, okay? These are your friends and your neighbors. And how do you tell Bob, Bob, understand that, especially when you're talking about townhomes and all that, it's calculated how many parking spaces there are, and they calculate the ones. So it's not like big single-family lots and there's 2 or 3 spaces in front. We require that it's calculated in, and if somebody turns it into a wood shop or something else, it just throws it all off.
And we're actually lenient. We have it's a 1 car only required.
Please, 1 car, yeah.
Right.
I know. Well, no, I joke about it sometimes. I tell people, listen, the city's never going to do anything. We're not going to go to single-family houses, but please, can you get at least 1 car in the garage? The streets looks better. The neighborhood looks. It's just better. But we're not going to be the ones enforcing it. I mean, that's just not something. I will tell you there is one thing that we do. We have people that have permit parking in their neighborhoods, and we just updated it and to make it more effective. But and the neighborhood votes it in. We don't vote it in. They vote it in, and here's the rules. And it has to have you have to show that so many of the cars don't belong to the neighborhood, and you get so many passes. When you want to get extra passes, because we want to be lenient. If you have 5 kids and 5 cars, we're going to give you extra passes for the street. But what we do at that point is we say we need to see your garage. If your garage is full of stuff, they're not going to hand over 2 more passes because it's. Remember the tragedy of the commons? It's economic principle. It's basically, you have 10 cows on 1 pasture and it holds 10 cows. And every farmer has 1 cow. And then one guy says, well, I'm going to put 2 cows in, and his production goes up. It all goes down a little bit because it can only really handle 10. And you've got 11, and then somebody else gets a 2nd cow and a 3rd cow, and basically what happens is the whole thing collapses because it can't even take care of, it just gets destroyed. And so in a community, I'm not going to say the tragedy of commons is parking, but clearly it's something that was planned for, should have been done. Now I will tell you, you go on certain sections of the east side and the west side, there was never any parking in some of these projects. I mean, today, it's 4 spaces per unit. It just is. You look at some of these apartment complexes, half space for a 1 bedroom, and I mean, who knows how they figured it out back in the day. But there was no parking. Over here.
How many overlay zones are there? Can you give me the delineation of where they are? Because I know over the years they were talking about growing them, and I haven't kept up with.
There's okay. I want to say there's 3. Maybe there are 4.
Are we talking just west side?
Well, the overlay, the major ones that we talk about all the time. West. But basically, the lines haven't ever changed from the existing lines. They stayed in place. I know that we looked at some of them and said, some of these, now the projects start to get developed and you see how it works. You say, that worked over there really well. I think we should allow that to be in other areas. So there has been some cross-pollination of some of the rules back and forth in there, but the lines are the exact same lines that have always happened in the city. But that's problematic too. I'll tell you, this is the project on Maple has the 3-story ones. They are too. So you're on the west side. I'm going to make my streets mixed up, and literally one side of the street is R1, and the other side is multifamily. And people have bought those and put the 3-story houses. Well, the 3-story houses look great when they're in a chunk by themselves. When you're on a line where right on the line is residential and one is commercial, residential guys going, wait a second, what happened here? So that's some of the problems that you have to kind of figure your way through is when there's a line right there. for the most part, the way those are subdivided up, they're not, people don't try to buy 3 or 4 lots to build a small project. It's pretty hard to do, so it doesn't really happen as much. But you can see where that could be a problem. Change in there, all the way back here.
Have any developers come to the city about low-cost senior housing? It doesn't seem like we have any low-cost senior housing in Costa Mesa.
So that's a great question. Let's talk about affordable housing. And I don't want to get into all the principles and everything else about, you know, affordable housing and should we have it or not have it and all that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about the basics of it being created and how it gets created. And I'll tell you from my experience, I was on the Housing Commission for the county over a dozen years. Half that time I was chairman. And I may be a, you know, very conservative Republican, but, you know, when there's dollars from the federal government to do housing, I'm going to make sure it gets spent right and properly. And we make sure that we can house people with the dollars that are set aside for it to do it. If I was king for a day, I might say the program's no good, but I'm not king. You know, basically it's how do we do the best we can for the program. And what's interesting is that we just had an issue with one of the motels. It's been a big push for many people over many years to get rid of some of the problem motels that we have in the city. And it's just the motel business, the outside staircases, the no control of it, the old model of people from Pasadena driving down to the beach for 3 days and staying in a motel is over. That business model is dead. People get their points from Marriott or their Visa card, or they do it on their phone. You book it and you do it. And if you're not at a certain level, it just drops off. But they're still there, okay? And I mean, the last major report that was done since before was like 1995, talked about we need to rezone this, add more density, do something to make it to the point where the motel owner wants to go out of business. Now, from the cost to our community, you know, I'll tell you, especially with this prop, I'm getting my, what's the 2 props that let people out of prison early? Prop 47 and then the other bills. AB 109. I mean, it is nuts what's happening out there right now. Not just our city, everywhere. But I will tell you, if you have cheap motels that take no identification to walk into, people get out of prison, where do they come? You know, if you don't have those motels, they don't come. It's that simple. The problem in the community is that you also had people that were hard on their luck or had financial difficulties living in motels. So there's this kind of human cry that says, I want to get rid of this drugs and prostitution and all sorts of stuff that happens here. And I mean, I don't even want to tell you what happens there. I mean, you pull in, well, my kids are, I'm not even going to tell you what's going on. It's a mess. But, and on top of it, you got, you know, 15, 20% people with their family and kids living in 300 square feet. And the position that the council's taken is, this is not affordable housing. $60 a night for 300 square feet, $1,800 a month is not affordable. And that we've got to just figure out how to change this or do something about it or work with groups, whatever. It's kind of like saying, you know, back in the day, you know, I know, you know, we shouldn't have kids work, but, you know, we don't have any money, so forget child labor laws. You just you change your society and say we don't do that anymore. So the problem is that people said, gosh, we could solve this whole problem. We finally got a property owner to go out of business, saying that and it was basically a deal. We'll give you more density. You have 236 motel rooms. We're going to give you 224 apartments, knock down, rebuild. And I'm talking about these apartments that look like cruise ships. You know, 2-story rock climbing walls and cabanas and the whole 9 things. I mean, the 1-bedrooms are like $1850, okay? These are nice products. And it's the Costa Mesa Motor Inn. And we finally got to the point, because these things are cash cows, to convince somebody. Now understand, we got to stick to, you know, we're going after them for every violation they have. So it's kind of painful. On the other hand, they still have a mortgage. They still have payments they have to make. You have to make something that says use the power you have in the city to get rid of that. Now that property there, I'll tell you, 2 years ago had over 500 calls for service a year. That's like 2 a day. So you have all these issues and you want to get rid of it. Now, we were talking about the initiative just passed. Once you made this deal, if the initiative passes to require a vote of the public, this deal is dead. Now it's already passed, it's already being done, so it's okay. But any other motel that you want to change, we'll take a vote of the people. I know what the people all say, I'll vote for that. But Colin's hit it on the head. There'll never be a vote. No one's going to spend $500,000, $800,000 to get it entitled and get it approved and then go to a vote of the people. Because why? You'd think you would. There was fights at the city, not physical fights, over what about the affordable housing? What about the affordable housing? There's a concept out there that people think if you vote, you can just vote for affordable housing. Why don't you require 20% to be affordable? You're giving that developer everything. We're giving the developer a lot to get rid of a motel. This isn't a vacant piece of land. You'll notice we don't do this on vacant pieces of land. Vacant piece of land, you got what you got, you can build what you build. But you want to get rid of a motel, you want to get rid of something seedy in our community, the council's going to help. I'll be right up front. I have my wife and my kids and live in this community. They don't need to see women in their underwear walking up and down Harbor Boulevard, which we have. So don't laugh. Daddy, why is she wearing her underwear? But the thing is, we'll just make it 20% affordable. Other cities do. What they understand is you have to pay for the building, the 20% of those units. There's not any free money here. There's concrete, there's 2x4s, there's windows, electricity. I mean, it all has to be built. And there's somehow a concept of, well, just make 20% of it affordable. You city council, I'm at the meeting, they're up at the microphone. You city council have the power to do that right now. I have the power to kill the deals. Well, I got the power to do it. I say, you're required to do 20% affordable housing. You go, thank you, we'll stay in the motel business. And it ends. The reality of it is, beyond the Housing Commission, and also as a member of a Mercy House, the board, we worked with getting homeless off the streets. But those units that get affordable get subsidized by something. So it's one thing to say, go do it. It's another thing for the city to come in and say, I'll pay for it. Or the federal government has some programs to pay for it. And then that gets into the whole the issue of what is it required for a city to do and its citizens to do, okay? So I always believe that the county level was where you could look at affordable housing. When you start getting closer and closer and closer to the point of saying, wait a second, should the taxpayers of Costa Mesa pay because somebody chooses to want to live in Costa Mesa who can't afford to be here? And that might sound kind of cold. People say that. But there are people every day who get in their car and drive to the Inland Empire because that's where they can afford to. 1% of the country lives in Orange County. 99% live somewhere else. And one of the problems that we have sometimes is people think that they can't change their circumstances. I'm doing projects around the country. You know what? You want to have a great standard of living? Move to Colorado. Buy a brand new house for $315,000, a brand new school, great community. The middle class lives fantastic. If you want perfect weather, you can come here, but it's more expensive. And so the question is, and this is the question, this is a policy question, does the community want to pay for that, subsidize it for somebody else? They may want to. And people can make that decision if they want to go ahead and do that. But understand there's a subsidy to do that. There's no free 2x4s, concrete, roofing material. It has to be paid for somehow to be able to have rents low enough to fit the affordable amounts.
When you say affordable housing, does that mean like $1,500 to $1,800 a month? Or I'm talking about low-cost senior housing. We don't have enough low-cost senior
Right.
housing.
And the same question, except politically, it's easy to pass low-cost senior housing, right? I mean, who's going to be against that? You still have to pay for it. You have to subsidize it. So understand there's not like a free money tree, that there are programs for those dollars out there, but a property owner has to say, I want to do affordable housing senior. And then they can go to the county. They can work with groups like Mercy House. I'm off the board now, but to work with us to help find the dollars to make up the gap. Because if it costs, and it does cost, $250,000 to build a one-bedroom unit, that's what it costs. Just figure the math out. Your rent's going to have to be a certain dollar figure to do it unless you subsidize that somehow. And there are methods of subsidizing it, and there's some tax credits to do it, but it's not the end-all, be-all as most people think there could be.
Let's go with one more question, and maybe Colin can answer one. We're running out of time.
Okay. Over here, Phil.
I had a question about dealing with the motels and the amount you say, that one had 500.
I think it was
calls.
552 calls.
Okay. How are they still in business? I mean, can't you just fine them to death?
Yeah,
Nuisance laws, fines increase, put in the fines increase exponentially once you get above.
So
200?
Okay, so when you're a charter city, you can do those things. When you're a general law city, you have limits on what you can do. And even as a charter city, there's some limits. But yeah, the fines that can double and triple, we can't do that. We have a certain amount of fine that we can do. And understand, there were fines. I think one fine was like $45,000. It was real money. It got their attention enough to say, we need to do something. And that's what we, kind of said, hey, listen, there's a stick and we're pounding on you. But here's a carrot to get you out of this business if you'd like to get into a different business. And I think you have to be that way about doing it. You just don't have what you think you have in a city. One of the things that I'll just touch on it real quickly, the whole marijuana issue that was going back and forth in our city, whether we should have medical marijuana, not medical marijuana, all these different issues. The reality of it is we don't have police powers in the city. So my position, whether you're for it or against it, the state needs to put some laws in place, like the ABC, alcohol beverage control for cannabis. Cities should not be handing out $1 million franchises to people to operate that business. The state should be in control of that because they have police powers. We can give you a ticket. We can do code enforcement. I can't put you in jail for breaking laws where the state can.
And my second part
Sure.
about that, the hotel and motel, is it following the same guidelines of 4 parking spots per unit?
No, motels had, remember these were built in the 50s and 60s. Oh, the new one, yes, yeah. It's not 4. 4's for houses over certain bedrooms. When you have a 1-bedroom and a studio, there are different counts. But it is hitting our regulation. And you'll find that when you have open parking structures, remember, all the parking spaces are open. Our rules do extremely good jobs. It works perfectly, the number of cars that have to be there, so it works out okay.
I want a closing comment.
Please.
I want just everybody to think about something as they're driving home or driving around town with this whole where is the city going. Years ago, before I was in Costa Mesa, we were told, say we, my predecessors in the city, my grandparents, everybody, that IKEA off the 405, was going to ruin Costa Mesa. It was Armageddon. It would be the end of life as we know it in our city. The traffic, the fear-mongering. I've read the articles. Drive down South Coast Drive in the morning, in the evening, just when you're out and about, and look and see what the traffic is over there. It's so important. If you take away nothing from my discussion, and Jim's touched on just about everything tonight. I could listen to Jim talk for 6 hours. Reality versus fear when it comes to planning and development. And look at how things really are versus how they are spun and what your mailbox says about things. And if you make those decisions and talk to your friends and neighbors about making decisions based on facts and science and what you see, you can't go wrong. So my closing pearls of wisdom.
Okay, let's give him a big hand. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.